Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and I've got my Week 4 Waiver Wire show primed and ready to roll for you. Now, depending on when you're watching this, Monday Night Football may not be done yet because we drop this on Monday mornings, but it really doesn't matter. Week 3 was a disaster. There were so many injuries, bad performances. I mean, the only place with more drop balls in the NFL this weekend was an all-boys middle school. That is how bad the performances were this week. So we've got a lot of people to talk about. But as always, we got to kick it off and let you know that the Waiver Wire show is brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax, one of the most customizable fantasy sports platforms in the industry today. If you're looking to start up a new league for any type of league, make sure you try out Fantrax and use the code word headliners when you go sign up over there and create a new account. Now, let's take a look at the comments. We do this every week now, a new segment this season. They said, what? And we take a look at some of the best comments of the past week. So go ahead and start throwing them up there. The first comment comes from the notorious Bob. Kyle, you're just a huge slot. Bob, how dare you judge me? I will do what I want with my body. It's not up to you. Mike Senior Shapini. Love the doc. Got some background pics now, and it doesn't look like his unused dining room. Love the work that you guys do. Dr. Ethan Turner, you were creeping us out a little bit. Glad that the background is looking better now. Bukowski. I drafted Tater Miles with my last pick, and he hasn't even seen one snap yet. I'm thinking this guy is a bust. Listen, Buck. Listen, we say it all the time. Trust the process, Tater. He will be a must start for you every single week very, very soon. And the Chronic Reaper. I love giving attention to the ones you got wrong, and I don't think it reflects badly on you. I think everyone is learning more every week, and analyzing the upsets, breakout players, and underperforming players is super important. You could do a whole episode on which players did better than expected and why, and I'd be all over it. Great point. We do that on our Start and Sit show every single week. We talk about the people we got wrong and the people we got right. But more importantly, we do it at the end of the season as well. We will go over all of our hits and all of our misses from this season on an episode at the very end of the year. So y'all will want to make sure that you check that out at the end of the season. But now it's time. We got to get into the people that we are going to be taking a look at on the waiver wire, whether we're going to be spending some fab on them, putting a waiver wire claim. And we're going to start at the running back position right now because the number one waiver wire guy is going to be right here. Let's go ahead and jump into it. From Carolina, Chuba Hubbard. I mean, with CMC going down, Chuba Hubbard is going to probably be the number one waiver wire pickup this week at 11.3% owned. CMC is expected to miss 3 weeks, and Hubbard is going to get the first shot to be the guy. I don't want anyone to forget about Royce Freeman, though. At only 0.1% owned, I expect a decent mix to start. Now, again, this is going to be Chuba Hubbard. This is going to be his backfield to start, and he is going to have the opportunity to do what he will with it. But if he struggles, gets the fumbles a little bit, if he has any missed assignments, things like that. Royce Freeman was a guy coming out of Oregon, drafted by Denver, that was highly touted by a lot of scouts. They really thought that this was a guy that could make an impact in the league. Unfortunately, Denver didn't think so. And now he's in Carolina. So hopefully Royce will get a little bit more run now with CMC being down for a few weeks. Latavius Murray from Baltimore at 45% owned. Tyson Williams only played 10 more snaps this past weekend than what Latavius Murray did. And on top of it, Latavius Murray had 2 more carries. Now, this wasn't by any means a game where Baltimore ran away from the Lions. They probably should have. And if Marquise Brown didn't have the dropsies, they probably would have. But what would have that looked like? Latavius Murray's going to be a guy. We've already talked about it on other episodes. We're really weary about Tyson Williams right now because, yes, the upside is potentially there in this offense, but Latavius Murray is seeing some decent snaps, and he's coming onto the field because Tyson Williams is not a great blocker. He has missed a lot of assignments. A fumble from a couple of weeks ago was because of Tyson Williams because he missed the blocking assignment. If that continues to happen, Latavius Murray is going to get more and more and more run. Now, for those of you in deeper leagues, Demetric Felton from Cleveland at 1.5% owned. I'm only going in deeper leagues. Now, I got a lot of questions on Felton over the past week. Why didn't you include him? He's going to be the slot wide receiver. 2 weeks ago, or last week really, Felton only saw 2 snaps in the slot. He isn't becoming the slot receiver. Is he being thrown out there a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. And they're trying to do some different things with him as well. And you could see it if you watch the Cleveland game this week. They did put him in the slot. They put him in the backfield. They put him in motion. They tried to do some sweeps with him. Tried to do, I believe at one point they even tried to do like a screen out on the perimeter. So Demetric Felton is a guy in deeper leagues that we will take a look at. And then also, if for some reason you have any type of special yardage type points that you might get, he returns kickoffs. He returns punts. He is a guy that can make people miss. So, for instance, if they have some more injuries there, that's definitely going to be the thing. Now, I've talked about him on the last 2 shows. Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's still my guy that I'm going to want to be getting a shot at, but he'll be coming up here in a second. But Demetric Felton is listed as a running back right now, getting some snaps out on the perimeter. So, that's fine. Take a look at him, especially if you're in deeper leagues and you're struggling to find a running back. You could possibly throw him out against Minnesota. Maybe if he scores a touchdown, he gets you some points. It's risky, though, but because I got so many questions last week, I had to include him this week. Peyton Barber. Yeah, those of you out in the comments, I'm not going to point any fingers, but there was a couple of you that gave me some big ish last week because I included Peyton Barber and then talked about Kenyon Drake as a drop. This is why you just keep your mouth shut and listen. Listen, Peyton Barber, 7.3% owned. Who knows when Jacobs will be back? But it is clear that Kenyon Drake isn't it. And we'll talk about that more in a minute when we get the players to drop. But Barber went 23, 111, and 1 this past week. Again, in a game where it wasn't even a blowout. It wasn't even a blowout. They were having issues with Miami for a while. It was a close game. And Peyton Barber was the guy in the backfield. If Peyton Barber's playing better than you, oh my gosh. For you Josh Jacobs owners, if you're having issues with running backs right now, you might as well pick up Barber and see what happens. Gio Bernard from Tampa Bay at 12.3% owned. Leonard Fournette and Rojo aren't doing anything right now. They don't look great. They have some decent runs here and there. But listen, Tom Brady led the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in rushing yards this past week. If Tom Brady is leading your team in rushing yards, you don't have very good running backs right now. So, Gio's starting to get more and more looks. 10 targets. Now, this is a game in which they were behind, right? They were passing it a lot. 10 targets, 9 receptions, 51 yards, and a touchdown. I don't expect him to be trailing in New England too often, but I do expect Tom Brady to want to put up a massive game in his return to Foxborough. Gio Bernard will be the one to do that. For you Dalvin Cook owners, Alexander Madison still only 40% owned, runs for over 100 yards this past week. If he's still available, grab him as a Cook owner this week in case Cook has to miss another week. Kerryon Johnson and Kyle Juszczyk, all right? Listen, at the time of this recording, because I record this typically at halftime of Sunday Night Football, they weren't doing anything on the ground. Trey Sermon looked like garbage. He had like 3 rushing attempts for -1 yards at the time of this recording. So, is he going to get another chance? Probably. But Kerryon Johnson is still a guy that if there's more injuries, if guys don't get back next week, whatever it may be, I would not be surprised to see Kerryon Johnson get some more looks next week with the way Trey Sermon has looked so far and Sunday Night Football. And then with Kyle Juszczyk, again, deeper leagues. If you're like in 14, 16-man leagues and you're having issues right now, take a look at Kyle Juszczyk. He's been out there quite a bit. They're doing some different things with him. We know in the past that they've given him some goal line carries because of the injuries to the backfield right now. He could get some looks out of the backfield as a pass catcher. All reasons to just keep an eye on him in very, very deep leagues. Time to change positions. Got to flip it over to wide receivers now, and there are a lot of them this week. Sammy Watkins starts it off for Baltimore at 31% owned. Three awful drops from Marquise Brown this past week. And Watkins turned in a pretty decent week. 4 catches on 7 targets, 68 yards. And now they're going to be going up against Denver. Marquise Brown is getting that first look there as the wide receiver 1. But Sammy Watkins is being a little bit more consistent for us right now and for Lamar Jackson. Jackson could be starting to trust him more and more moving forward. Khalif Raymond at 0.5% owned. He saw 10 targets, and the Lions continue to throw like crazy right now. He's not anyone that we're starting, but we'll see if maybe he can kind of take Quintus Cephas, take him over as that wide receiver 1 there. Anthony Miller in Houston at 0.7% owned is becoming the wide receiver 2 for Houston. Mills actually didn't look too bad this past week, and he might be looking Miller's way in the slot a little bit more often. Obviously, with a whole lot of cooks all over the place, craving that attention from the defense, Anthony Miller could really slip in and have some touchdowns, some decent performances moving forward. Terrace Marshall Jr. for Carolina, only 14% owned. 5 targets last week, no CMC for 3 weeks, and the Robbie Darnold connection just isn't there. I'm expecting a Terrace Marshall Jr. breakout very soon. Emmanuel Sanders at 23% owned, coming off a great week. Had him listed as a start this week. Boy, did he hit on that. 5 receptions on 6 targets, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's clearly the number 3 in an offense that loves to throw a lot and has more than enough to spread around. PJ, like I mentioned a second ago, at 1.6% owned. There's no Jarvis right now. And now that OBJ is out there healthy and running, he's going to get the looks from the offense, right? And then if you have Hunt out there, Hunt's going to be peeped out of the backfield. You've got weapons really all over the place. They talked about it on the broadcast this week about how Cleveland can be very difficult to guard at times because they have all these different formations that they're constantly running out of. Now, Felton, which I mentioned a minute ago, will take a look at his snaps in the slot and DPJs when that data becomes available to us tomorrow. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, again, he is the big play potential there right now. And Anthony Schwartz hasn't looked good. He's had some bad drops. He's run some bad routes. He's looking really, really raw right now. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, is a guy that while Jarvis Landry is out, could really step up and be a big-time playmaker for Baker Mayfield in this offense. Christian Kirk for Arizona. I mean, basically, people gave up on him after a bad week last week. There's still some people that own him, but he's down to 22.7%. And lots of people, again, forgot about Christian Kirk last week. But going up against the Rams next week, Ramsey's probably going to be seeing Hopkins. Obviously, Rondale Moore had a down performance this week, but when you go up against the Rams, you're going to have to throw it a lot, which means a ton of targets for Christian Kirk. And he's really kind of the safer bet over Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore has a higher ceiling than Kirk, but he has a lower floor than Kirk as well. Kirk falls right in the middle of that. Marquez Callaway at 47% owned. I mean, the offense is going to be an issue on a weekly basis. There's not really a wide receiver on this team right now that you trust. You can't trust the tight ends. Alvin Kamara has been okay at best. The offense just is not itself without Drew Brees. But Callaway did finally find the end zone this past week. Had 41 yards on 4 receptions. Hopefully him and Jameis are starting to hook up a little bit more again, and we see some of that fire that we saw in the preseason. If not, Marquez Callaway would end up being just kind of a waste of a pickup, but keep your eye on it anyway. Colin Johnson for the New York Giants at 0.1% owned. There was injuries to both Slayton and Shepard this week, and I have not heard anything more on what we're looking at long term. So keep Colin Johnson on your list, on your watch list, especially if you own Sterling Shepard. He went he had 7 targets, 5 receptions, and 51 yards after Slayton and Shepard ended up coming out of the game. Keep an eye on those guys. Colin Johnson, you're not going to have to use a waiver wire or anything for. If you end up needing to set Shepard because he ends up being out next week, you could end up probably grabbing Johnson, and going up against New Orleans, he could definitely be a guy to look at. And then also, Kenny Golladay, still dealing with injuries. For Pittsburgh, James Washington at 1.3% owned. Johnson and Juju are both hurt right now, and we have seen it in the past with James Washington. When he has an opportunity, sometimes he'll step up. Now, 957 targets this past week went to Najee Harris and Chase Claypool, but James Washington on the other side, if these guys continue to miss time, is going to be an option for you, especially going up against a Green Bay secondary that has had some issues kind of stopping wide receiver twos. Nick Westbrook Akinney. Now, I probably messed that name up. I honestly, before this show, didn't have a whole lot of information on him. He comes out of nowhere, has a really good performance for Tennessee after A.J. Brown goes down with an injury. He's not owned in any leagues right now, according to 0.0%, and I would assume that to be correct. But Chester Rogers is actually going to be the guy that I'm looking at, because if A.J. Brown misses any time, yes, Nick Westbrook, we can call him NWI, okay? NWI, he was kind of the main guy this past week. He kind of came out of nowhere and had a really good week for Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. However, Chester Rogers is kind of a more consistent guy that we should be taking a look at. 11 targets in the first 2 games. He was out targeted by Nick in the last game, but that's all right. I think moving forward, Chester Rogers would be a much safer bet. Tim Patrick at 14% owned. KJ Hamler, he is looking like not a great injury at this point. To the knee, had to be helped off the field. Tim Patrick is the wide receiver 2 on this team and only 14% owned. He is 100% a guy that could be a wide receiver 2-3 start for us for the rest of the season until Jerry Jeudy gets back anyway. Hunter Renfrow and Bryan Edwards, 11% owned for Renfrow, 14 for Edwards. Renfrow this past week goes 6 targets, 5 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. He has 13 targets over the last 2 weeks. He is a definite PPR option. Bryan Edwards is probably going to be a little bit more inconsistent than Hunter Renfrow, but he's kind of a big play guy for them right now. Again, not a great performance this season. It took till week 1 to kind of, in the last few plays, to come out of nowhere. Week 2 didn't really do anything, but he did have a touchdown that didn't end up quite hauling in. And then also this past week, not a bad week. He's teasing us, but really kind of built like on one huge play. Again, we got to keep an eye on Bryan Edwards. He was a guy that we liked before the season. I loved him coming out of the draft. I think Las Vegas got a steal for him. But basically missing all of his last year in college, hurt, was banged up last year, fully healthy now. We're trying to get him going. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling for Green Bay at 3.4% owned. He's the number 2 in this offense. And his stats would look a million times better if Aaron Rodgers hadn't screwed up 3 passes last week, all right? One pass was underthrown, hit the defender in the back of the head. The other pass was overthrown by about 5 yards. And he was wide open in the end zone at the goal line, and Rodgers threw it behind him. He's the number 2 in this offense now. I think we need to go ahead and grab him and hold him moving forward. Moving on to the tight end position. Dan Arnold from Carolina at 0.9% owned. 4 targets last week. Didn't end up having nearly as good as a week as we would have liked, but he had 2 targets that he had in his hands, but because of where Sam Darnold threw the ball, he kind of got plastered by the linebacker. So it didn't give him an opportunity to catch and hold the ball. He was getting hit as the ball was out in front of him. So it could have actually ended up being a much bigger week. He probably had another 25 or so yards on those balls that he ended up getting knocked down on. If he would have caught them, it would have been a much bigger week for him. And again, that the Robbie Anderson connection is not there right now. Dan Arnold, again, he's never been a thing till last week. I did hit one of my 2 player props on him, but in good matchups, he could help us out. Dawson Knox for Buffalo. Ladies and gentlemen, TDs in back-to-back weeks. Is it happening? Is Knox happening? Come on. Let's start calling this man Hard Knocks, right? Because it's so hard to love him. Because of the offense that he plays in, all of the opportunities, and he's got touchdown upside every single week. I would not be surprised if he scores a touchdown against Houston this week. Buffalo throws and throws and throws and throws. The problem is Dawson Knox is more like a GPP play. Like if you play DFS, like a guy that you would play in a GPP or a tournament of some kind. He's not really a guy that we're picking up in fantasy football land and starting. But if there were to be an injury to a wide receiver, Dawson Knox becomes a lot more valuable to us. Pat Freiermuth, again, all the injuries to Pittsburgh right now. He did play a much larger role this week. Yes, it was just basically predicated on 1 touchdown. 22 receiving yards, 3 receptions. But if these injuries to Juju and Deontay Johnson linger, Freiermuth is a guy that we could stream. Tyler Conklin from Minnesota, finally they utilized the tight end position. Congratulations, Minnesota, 2.6% owned. He has 7 receptions on 8 targets for 70 yards and a touchdown. KJ Osborne took a big step back this week. I think we could see those two guys go back and forth. If KJ Osborne isn't getting it, Tyler Conklin's probably getting it. If Conklin isn't getting it, AJ Osborne or KJ Osborne's getting it. So those two are probably going to go back and forth quite a bit. And Cole Kmet at 21% owned. He hasn't really done anything. And it's because Matt Nagy sucks as a head coach. I mean, let's be honest here. A lot of people are harping on Justin Fields for his first start. Matt Nagy called an atrocious game. I mean, you drafted this guy in the first round. Let him throw the frickin' football, man. You ran the ball on the first play of your drive, like 8 out of 9 straight drives. Why? Have him throw it. Bootleg out. Throw it on the run. Throw it deep. Do something with Justin Fields. What are you doing there? I hate Matt Nagy. If Fields progresses and still continues to be the starter, I'm thinking we're going to see a little bit more Cole Kmet, because that just seems to be the game plan that Matt Nagy had this week, where we're doing these little short, crappy dump passes because we're an awful head coach and we don't know how to call football games. Don't get me started on Matt Nagy. Now it's time for the streaming portion of this show, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about some quarterback and defenses that we could stream in week 4. Let's kick it off with the quarterbacks. Jacoby Brissett from Miami at 1.5% owned. Miami did not dumb down the offense, okay? They did not take a step back from what they were doing with Tua. They still threw the football, and Indianapolis will be an easier matchup than what Las Vegas was. Taylor Heineke from Washington at 1.5% owned. He gets Atlanta this week. He's still going to pass 20 plus times a game, and he gets a little bit of extra on the ground for you. I mean, he could be right around 30 rushing yards for you in any given game. Derek Carr for Las Vegas at 49.2% owned. You got to be under 50% to be in the show. Ooh, falling right there underneath it. Going up against the Chargers this week, they're going to be throwing it a bunch. LAC coming off a big win up against KC on the road, and now they get Las Vegas. Derek Carr is going to be throwing it quite a bit this week. And Sam Darnold for Carolina. This dude's only 9% owned. What? Why is he 9% owned? This could be another good game for him going up against the Dallas defense. And he's adding some rushing touchdowns right now. Why not start him? For the defenses, Miami at 20% owned going up against Indianapolis with Wentz banged up. This could be an opportunity for sacks. And when we're looking at streaming defensive special teams, yeah, we want to limit the points, but I want sacks and I want turnovers, because those are just extra points that we can get. Tennessee at 7.4% owned going up against New York. Now, Tennessee has not had a very good defense this year, but Zach Wilson has thrown 972 interceptions the last 2 weeks, and because of that, like I just said, we're looking for interceptions, we're looking for turnovers, we're looking for sacks. Tennessee could create some. And Green Bay at 16.5% owned going up against Pittsburgh. Again, lots of players right now in the Pittsburgh offense dealing with injuries. Could be a really good opportunity for Green Bay this week, especially after doing so well in the first half against San Francisco on the road. Now, let's talk about some players to drop. And again, with this section of the video, it isn't necessarily saying drop these guys right now. For some of the higher end guys, we have to have a conversation on it, like we have had the past couple of weeks, talking about OBJ and the injury, talking about Kenny Galladay and what he's done. We talk about them because I want it on your radar. It doesn't necessarily mean we're dropping them right this second. Ronald Jones I'm going to drop, though, and Kenyon Drake, both of these guys. Listen, the run game for Tampa Bay isn't doing anything. It's not going to do anything this coming week against New England. Ronald Jones isn't doing anything, and Gio's creeping up behind him right now. If you're wasting a spot just keeping Ronald Jones on the bench waiting for an injury, I don't know if I can do it anymore at this point. For Kenyon Drake, he's 86% owned. And you're going to be like, Kyle, he got 6 targets last week. Peyton Barber got 5. And was the lead back on the ground. If Kenyon Drake can't beat out Peyton Barber for touches, he's definitely not beating out Josh Jacobs when he comes back. I don't know why Las Vegas even signed this guy. Oh my God. Mike Mayock, I've stuck up for you for quite a bit, but I don't understand this signing if you're not going to utilize him. Russell Gage for Atlanta at 20% owned. He's hurt, and he's kind of an afterthought in the offense right now. Zacchaeus this weekend got a touchdown. We're seeing, obviously, Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley as the main two targets. Cordarrelle Patterson now is getting a lot of looks, whether it be at wide receiver or at running back. Robbie Anderson at 90% owned. About done with him because the Darnold connection isn't there. And there were a lot of people that tried to call me out saying, oh, I'm not going to draft DJ Moore at his spot because I'd rather have a better value of Robbie Anderson several rounds later. How's that working out for you? It's not. Robbie Anderson, just because he played with Sam Darnold in New York, didn't mean that these guys were going to become best friends again and always connecting. Robbie Anderson has been non-existent, and I mentioned it with Terrace Marshall Jr. Terrace Marshall Jr., if he breaks out, Robbie Anderson is going to maybe have a big game every now and then, but he is not going to be a guy that you can start on a consistent basis. Now, he could be okay over the next 3 weeks with CMC being out and some of those targets needing to go from CMC to the other guy, so we're not dropping him right now. But if he doesn't do anything over the next several weeks when CMC comes back, we got to be done with Robbie Anderson. Darnell Mooney hurts. Darnell Mooney hurts at 49% owned because he was a guy that I really loved. But kind of going back to what I said a couple of minutes ago, Matt Nagy is an idiot. They're not pushing the ball down the field. Laviska Shenault Jr. for Jacksonville at 77% owned. There is no upside in this guy's game right now. All of his targets are in the short passing game, but they're not doing enough to get open, to get him into the open area for him to pick up yards after the catch. He's essentially getting a catch and he's getting downed right there. He's got no upside right now. Jonnu Smith at 77% owned. If you're going to have bad drops like Jonnu Smith did, you better not do it in Bill Belichick's offense because you will find yourself in the doghouse. Now, I love Jonnu Smith, but my bet on the tight end breaking out in this offense was going to be Hunter Henry. And if Jonnu Smith continues to drop passes, Hunter Henry's going to see more of them. I can bet you that. And Corey Davis from the New York Jets at 84% owned. This is not Davis's fault. This is not, I mean, he was a guy who I drafted in a couple of leagues late because I was like, hey, if I got a wide receiver 4 that's going to be the main target, perfect. I can start him every once in a while. But Zach Wilson looks like crap right now. I mean, he looks bad. And during the pre-draft process, when I was scouting Zach Wilson, that was kind of what I said was, especially if he starts right away, we might see some highs, but we are going to see some lows. We are going to see a wildly inconsistent quarterback that is going to have issues. That is what we have seen so far. He had 10 targets last week, but how many of them are actually catchable? He only caught 5 of them. Not all of his targets are actually on target. So for Corey Davis, I would love to keep him on my team. Definitely could be a target monster. But if Zach Wilson isn't going to improve, it's not going to help Corey Davis. Ladies and gentlemen of Headliner Nation, there you go. My week 4 waiver wire video for you. Make sure you leave a comment down below and let me know who you're going to be taking a shot at this week on the waiver wire. Or if there's somebody not mentioned in this video, let me know if you should be trying to grab them, and I'll let you know my thoughts in the comments. And if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, number 1, you got to hit that subscribe button and stick around. But number 2, make sure you hit that like button along with the rest of you that are already a part of Headliner Nation. Would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to get out of here. Everybody stay safe and healthy. Have a great start to your week. And I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.